Hello and welcome to this webinar entitled Boilerplate Clauses, Ignore Them At Your Peril. My name is Keith Markham and I'll be delivering this particular session for you today. As always, let's begin by having a look at the agenda for this session and just summarise what we're going to be going through. We'll begin by talking about force majeure. Where else? What a better place? Couldn't think of a better place to start in the context of COVID-19. We'll look at two cases, in fact, one that's got nothing to do with COVID-19 and everything to do with fires and foreseeability and various other Fs that we might come up with. And then we'll go on to look at another case that is to do specifically with COVID-19, a case that is worth well over £1 billion, and I suspect is going to rumble its way through our courts in various iterations over the next few years. So we'll start with that. We'll then go on to talk about something we very rarely, thankfully, have case law on, and that is the Contract Rights of Third Parties Act 1999. There is, however, one very interesting case that allows us to look at the rules in terms of working out whether a contract purports to confer a benefit on a third party, and also looks at issues of identification of class of that particular third party as well. It's a very, very useful case, that one. We then have the ubiquitous issue of notice clauses, which is very much the gift that keeps on giving to presenters like myself. Every year there are new notice clause cases that frankly show yet again that people haven't learned the lessons of the past. We'll look at two in particular, one that deals predominantly with timing and one that deals with levels of detail of the notice. So we'll look at those two things. And then an issue that we all are familiar with in terms of the phrase, but we don't really see much case law on, the idea of subject to consent. You can do this subject to the consent of the other party. In what circumstances can that consent be withheld reasonably? And in what circumstances must you not withhold that consent? Some actually quite interesting cases, two in particular, that we'll talk about there. Then we'll go on to talk about no waiver clauses and look at a case, frankly, that makes my head ache every time I look at it. But there are some interesting points with regard to this particular topic on it. Then we'll talk about severance. And there was a Supreme Court ruling on these issues around about 2 years ago, and we've now got a more recent High Court case that applies some of those principles in quite an interesting way to do with a particular clause. And finally, we'll look at variation. Many of you will know that there was a very well-known case on this topic involving the now almost notorious Lord Sumption with regard to this topic. And essentially, we've got a High Court case that now looks to apply some of those principles and so on.